Welcome back, that's your show Sniper. So today my Tony Gwynn came in the mail from Propstein. Um, I believe I bought this for less than $300 and the PSA 10 is about $700. So I'm pretty happy with this purchase. In my opinion, a 9.5 is the same as a PSA 10. Okay, I know people have a different opinion about that, but let's have a look at the card. The card centering is pretty good. Corners and edges look good, and no visible chipping. So the subgrades, centering is 9.5, edges 9.5, corners we got 9, surface is 9.5. So I guess somewhere there's a corner that's slightly soft. I can't see at the moment, but I'm sure under this microscope here, I'll be able to find out which one. But like I was saying in the other video, even with PSA 10s, you may find a soft corner or whatever. I'm a collector and I'm not a flipper. My main focus is to get well-centered cards that look like they're gem mint. And to me, a 9.5 and a 10, they have the same issues or they have the same qualities. And I don't value one over the other. So when a 9.5 sells for significantly less, I will consider this as a much better deal. So this is something that you can consider if you can't find, let's just say you find most of the PSA 10s you're looking for unaffordable, then go for a Beckett or go for an SGC 10 or 9.5. That's just my opinion, however. Now, today's video, I want to talk about buying raw versus buying graded Desert Shield cards. Now, recently, if you've been watching my shorts, I had a couple raw Desert Shield cards came in, and some looks pretty good, but I was kind of disappointed with the David Wells. I was looking forward to David Wells. Um, the David Wells is kind of hard to find well centered, and that card was pretty good in terms of the centering. But under closer inspection, I did notice there were some surface issues. Now, I don't blame the seller because I think, first of all, one of the things I want to mention is that when you're buying raw cards on eBay or any online platform, um, the seller will most likely describe the card as near mint, but based on the eye appeal. And eye appeal does not count things like, minor hair scratches or certain surface issues like minor indentation on the card. Um, and some may argue about that, but at least on eBay, if you were to return the card because there was these minor issues and the card was listed as near mint, I'm not quite sure whether or not eBay would side with you. And at least it's for, I think for buyers and sellers, it's kind of a common knowledge or acceptance that a near mint raw card will have certain, or you should expect certain flaws or defects up to a certain point. Okay, if the card has like a really big chipped edge or like three dinged corners and the seller considered that as a near mint card, that may be a different story. But basically, if you picked up the card and it looked something like this, but on a very close inspection you see like a hairline scratch or just a tiny bit of a imprint, then I would say the default is not on the seller. But however, I do think that most sellers do know that, and that's why they didn't grade it. So yeah, the one thing that you should keep in mind is when you're buying raw cards, why didn't the seller grade the card? Okay, and I think especially if you're buying a star or Hall of Famer, like I was mentioning in a previous video, where I had that really perfectly centered Ricky Henderson, and I took it into PSA and had it graded and came back a 5 and found out that there was this slightly indentation in the card on the top left surface that I couldn't see before I sent the card in to PSA. Um, you know, Hall of Famer, superstar, uh, perfectly well centered. I should have questioned why the seller didn't grade the card. And well, it's pretty obvious that the seller did find the imprint, and that's why um, he or she sold the card as a raw card. Now, I collect raw Desert Shield and graded Desert Shield, and most of my graded Desert Shield cards are 9s and 10s. Now, the reason why I collect a raw set is, first of all, I don't mind having a raw set. I think most people that collect Desert Shield cards will at least aim for a second set. Raw cards are easier to store, and also, like, if you want to display it in a booklet, even if they're in top loaders, they're much easier to store in terms of, because of the fact that there's 792 cards. So imagine having like a slabbed folder with these pages for slabs, but for 792 cards. I don't even think that's possible because due to the thickness of these slabs. But for top loader pages, um, the binder may be a bit thick, or you may have to split it between two binders, but it's possible because I've checked before, and because I haven't started this project yet, I don't have enough cards where I want to start putting my raw Desert Shield cards into a binder yet. But um, they do sell these top loader binders on Amazon, which can store about 480 top loaded cards. So if you have two binders, it will definitely fit the 792 card Desert Shield set. Now, that's the thing about buying online, right? Like, so the card looks good with the thumbnail, and then you zoom in, and the corners and edges look pretty good. But because most of these cards, they'll be scanned, right? And a lot of times, because what happens is the lighting on these scanners will hide a lot of the flaws, like imprints or scratches on the card. And so, unless you have it on hand, it's pretty hard to tell whether or not that raw cards have any scratches or scuffs on the surface. It's a little better if you're buying raw cards at a show, because you can always pick it up, and if you have a loop, you can always look through the card through a loop. And obviously, you can also bring one of these, which is the black light, to check whether or not the card glows. By the way, this one glows. Let's have a look. Yeah, first thing I do is I shine the black light onto the Topps 40, and if that glows, then it's a glow back. Well, the glow front, I should say. But it should glow. The authentic cards should glow, even in the front. And then the back glows, so it passed the black light test. But as we mentioned before, that's not the only thing that you should look for if you're checking the authenticity of the card. The other thing you could do is to bring a microscope like this. Now, obviously, you're not going to bring something of this size. Now, this is also portable, and you can just take this apart. And on one charge, this will last about 45 minutes to an hour. And it also depends on whether or not you use the LED lights. And I think most of the time you will, because most of the conditions will be pretty dark. But the thing is, the image, this connects through Wi-Fi, so you can actually check the card, and the magnified image will be displayed on your um, smartphone. So these are pretty cheap, actually. You can find these on Amazon as well, probably eBay, I would imagine. And they're very small, right? So you could just carry it in your pocket or in your Zion cases, etc. But a really good thing to have, because um, there's only a certain amount of things that you can spot through the naked eye. And if you're trying to check chipping, like for example, I'm pretty sure just the way how these cards were cut, even though this card looks pretty clean on the edges, under magnification, you'll see a very, very minor chipping. And that's very normal with these cards. So it's good to bring these along if you're checking out Desert Shield cards at a card show. Okay, so that's the thing. Like about the mentality when you're buying raw cards online. Like, don't expect a high grade. Like, expect a mid grade, and I think you'll be happy and you won't get disappointed. If you're very specific or condition sensitive to a particular player you're chasing, and you want a very high grade, or at least the condition of the card to be in a very high grade, then get a high grade, right? Um, it's the only way that you can be certain. And sure, I mean, I mentioned in a previous video, some tens don't look like tens; they look like nines, and I've seen a ten that look like eight. I have a Gretzky that's a nine, and sorry, it's an eight, and it looks like a six. But the chances of the grading companies um, making that big of a mistake is much less than buying a raw card and assuming just because it looks good by eye appeal that it's going to grade a 9 or 10. I think the chances of that is very slim. So that's why, first of all, I have two sets. Like, first of all, the raw set, I believe, and I hope so, will be completed a lot faster than my graded set, because for the graded set, I'm mainly chasing nines and tens. And the thing with nines and tens, even if money is not a big issue, sometimes the cards are just not available and you have to wait. And I've been there, and sometimes it doesn't pop up for like 6 months. And then when they pop up, I'm very specific about the centering, and it may be a bit off for my taste, and I may decide to skip, and I have to wait another 6 months or whatever for the next graded PSA 10. So yeah, so that's the thing about buying raw and buying graded. And I think the other thing that we mentioned before is also the chances of the graded Desert Shield cards being a fake is less likely. Now, I say that, and at the time of this video, there's actually a graded um, BGS Nolan Ryan that is fake on eBay at the moment. It's an autographed Nolan Ryan, and to be fair, um, it was only graded. The autograph was graded, and not the card. But I think for the grading companies, if any grading company is watching this, they shouldn't grade these cards, because it's an autograph on a fake card, and I actually, the autograph doesn't look that good to me neither. So I kind of suspect that that slab may be fake as well. But if you're curious to find out, just type Nolan Ryan Auto BGS and you'll find it on eBay. So, but the thing, yeah, like, majority of the times, like 90% or more of the times, if you buy graded, you rest assured the Desert Shield card will be authentic. And my experience with buying Desert Shield cards on eBay is that, I mentioned before that I bought a fake Cal Ripken record breaker, and once it arrived, I realized that it was fake. I spoke to the seller, spoke to eBay. The seller didn't offer a refund, and eBay saw the images and took my side and gave me a refund immediately. It's like it came in 2 days. So that's that's another thing about buying from a like a online platform like eBay rather than buying from someone random online through Facebook Marketplace or whatever. There's more quality or authenticity assurance. So I don't have a big preference in terms of, oh, should I buy raw or graded, because since I collect both, right? But I do think if you're worried about the authenticity and you do want a certain standard in terms of the condition of the card, you should definitely consider collecting the graded Desert Shield cards. Because, and I'm not saying that you have to aim at PSA 9s and 10s. You could easily go for PSA 6 and 7s, and they're not that expensive. I mean, maybe a few cars will still be quite pricey, like the Chipper or maybe the Griffey or Nolan Ryan. But even a lot of the stars at PSA 7, they're not cheap, but they're approachable and they're affordable. So, but the thing is, first of all, one good thing about buying cards in the slab, and this goes for general sports cards, they're protected, and you seal it off from dust. Unless, I mean, sure, it's not 100% foolproof, and unless you live in a very dusty environment. But I think that most of the time, like for example, if you collect BGS, they also have an extra sleeve that protects the card. So that's one thing I like about collecting slab Desert Shield or any cards, is that it's already protected. Now, with PSA, I'm seeing a lot more issues as they change things at PSA. I complain about PSA, but yet I collect PSA. It's very frustrating. It's a love-hate relationship. And one thing I really hate about PSA is that they're changing their labels constantly. So, and to be fair, I mean, they're an older company. And so they've changed their labels, I think, about close to like 8 to 10 times throughout the last 30-ish years. It started in 91. So today's 2025. So that's 34 years, right? So on average, I don't remember if it was 9 or 10 times, but it's close to that number. So on average, they change their labels once every 3 years. And with the last label or the latest label, this one here, um, well, while they haven't changed it in quite a while, we do know that once the certification reaches nine digits, that they've kind of changed the grading standards, right? With at least with the centering, it's no longer 60-40. It's now 55-45, and you do see a lot more cards that look like they're slightly undergraded because of these new grading standards. So that's one thing, and they're also like, a lot of people may not notice this, but throughout the years, the slabs have changed quite a bit too. And earlier on, there were big issues about the quality of the slabs, which I won't get into. But I would expect one of the leaders and a company that's been around for the longest time should have this down pretty well. And that's not to say that they can't make mistakes, but with the quality of the slab, the issue of that earlier on last year, I would I would expect them to test these things out before they start issuing graded cards with these faulty products, right? And the fact that they didn't even offer people to reslab the cards was kind of ridiculous in my mind, because that was at the type of grading, and it was very expensive. The, the turnover time was very, very long. And, the cards were returned with a faulty product where a lot of people experienced damaged or cracked slabs. So, in any other business, you would get a refund or an exchange. But in this case, collectors were just, told, well, that's too bad. You can have it reslabbed, but you got to pay the reslab fee. So I wasn't too happy with that. But luckily, I didn't get too many cards graded at that period. And while I think I do have like 4 or 5 graded cards from that time with that slab, but luckily they weren't damaged or it didn't have that crack, the famous slitter of a crack on the top right corner. But anyway, so yeah, so that's something that you should consider also when it comes to buying graded cars. Like when were they graded? Were there issues with the slab at that time, or how about the labels? Like we all know, a Desert Shield card that was labeled in the early '90s may not have the same grade or may not be viewed as the same quality as a PSA 10 equivalent of something that was graded recently. And although, in my opinion, I don't just value the card by the label. Obviously, even if it's a label from like the early '90s, I would still definitely check the card out as carefully as I can, as closely as I can, ensure that the card is well centered, not a lot of chipping is visible. It's got to look at least like a 10 before I buy it, and I don't mind buying older labels. I made a video before mentioning that if you think about it, some of the most expensive vintage cards have old labels. So it's not that the old labels is a problem, but what is a fact is that the cards graded at that time were graded a lot looser. So when you're buying graded Desert Shield cards from that time, you do need to be extra careful with checking out the actual condition of the cards, checking the eye appeal, making sure there's not a lot of surface issues. I think in the '90s, people were just more focused on corners and less on centering. That's why you see a lot of Desert Shield PSA 10s from that time, and they're definitely more off-centered than 60/40. And those are the cards that I want to stay away from. Not because they're not good cards, but if I'm going to pay a PSA 10 premium, I want my cards to be well centered. At least that's my opinion. So that's my thought about buying raw cards versus graded cards. I would love to hear from all of you, and if you have a different opinion about buying raw and versus graded, leave me a comment and let me know. Please subscribe and like this video if you want to hear more about Desert Shield cards.